The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never seen such a gathering. 47 different species filled the crystal seats, their alien forms creating strange shadows on the walls. Some floated in glowing energy fields. Others needed special breathing masks. A few were so small they sat in mechanical chairs that made them look bigger. Sarah Chen sat alone in the human section. Her dark suit looked plain next to the colorful robes and strange armor of the other ambassadors. She watched them with calm eyes even though she knew what was coming. The Zephyrian Archon floated at the center of the room. His body was made of pure energy, shifting between blue and white like living lightning. When he spoke, his voice came from speakers around the hall. "We are here today to decide the fate of Earth," the Archon said. "Humanity has broken our laws too many times. They refuse to follow the rules that keep peace in our galaxy." Murmurs filled the hall. Some aliens nodded their heads, or whatever they used for heads. Others made clicking sounds or flashed different colors. The Draconian representative stood up. She was tall and proud, with scales that gleamed like gold. "Humans are too violent," she said in a voice like grinding stone. "They interfere in conflicts that are not their business. They make war when we say make peace," more voices joined in. The spider-like Veltar clicked their approval. The plant people from Verdania rustled their leaves in agreement. Even the normally quiet rock beings from the Korthak system hummed their low approval. Sarah listened to each complaint. She had heard them all before. Humans were too aggressive, too willing to fight, too quick to help others without asking permission first. The worst crime, they said, was what happened at Proxima. A civil war had been tearing the planet apart for months. The Council had voted to let them fight it out. No interference allowed. But when both sides started targeting civilian shelters, human Marines had landed anyway. They saved thousands of lives from both armies. "They ignored our direct orders," said the Altarian Prime Minister. His blue skin turned darker with anger. "They put their own feelings above galactic law." "Human emotions make them dangerous," added the Veltar ambassador through his translation device. "They cannot think clearly when others suffer." Sarah almost smiled at that. They said it like it was a bad thing. One by one, the species spoke against Earth. The hegemony of Tau Ceti called humans unpredictable chaos bringers. The crystalline collective said they disturbed the natural order. Even species that had never directly dealt with humans voted against them, following the lead of their stronger neighbors. Only the small delegation from the Outer Rim world spoke for humanity. Ambassador Kiex, who looked like a walking tree, stood on shaking legs. "Humans helped us when the raiders came," Kiex said in his creaky voice. "They asked for nothing in return. They bled for our children." But his words were lost in the sea of opposition. The big powers had already made up their minds. Finally, the Archon called for quiet. "The time for debate is over. All species will now vote. To remove Earth from the Galactic Council, vote yes. To let them stay, vote no." The voting was electronic, but the results appeared on the great screen for all to see. One by one, the votes came in. Yes, yes, yes. A few small worlds voted no, but their voices were tiny against the tide. Sarah watched her datapad as her aide sent updates from Earth. The vote was being broadcast live across human space. Billions of people were watching their species get kicked out of galactic civilization. When the final count appeared, the hall fell silent. 46 votes to remove Earth. Only one vote to let them stay. Sarah stood up slowly. Every alien eye in the hall turned to her. She looked small and alone in the vast space, but her voice carried clearly when she spoke. "The Human Federation accepts this decision," she said. "We will leave the Council immediately." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. It looked like a simple communication pad, but Sarah knew it was much more than that. She pressed her thumb to the scanner and spoke clearly into the microphone. "This is Ambassador Chen. Authorization code Alpha 77. Execute Protocol 7 immediately." The words meant nothing to the aliens watching. But across human space, military commanders and government officials received the same message at the same time. Protocol 7 was active. Sarah put the device away and gathered her papers. She moved without hurry, as if she was just leaving another boring meeting. The aliens watched her pack up 300 years of human participation in galactic government. "That's it?" asked the Draconian representative. She sounded almost disappointed. "No threats? No angry words?" Sarah looked up at her with a slight smile. "Why would I make threats? You've made your choice. Now you get to live with it." She picked up her bag and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silent hall. At the door, she paused and looked back at the assembled aliens. Good luck, she said simply. Then Sarah Chen, last ambassador from Earth to the Galactic Council, walked out of galactic politics forever. Behind her, the aliens began to talk excitedly. They had won. The troublesome humans were gone. No more interference in their carefully planned wars. No more emotional outbursts about civilian casualties. No more humans doing dangerous jobs that civilized species avoided. The Archon's energy form pulsed with satisfaction. It is done. Humanity is no longer part of civilized space. Perhaps now we can have peace. The other ambassadors agreed loudly. Some were already planning how to divide up the territory that Earth controlled. Others talked about the trade routes that would now be free for their use. None of them noticed the first signs of what was coming. On Altair Prime, a navigation beacon flickered and went dark. In the Vega system, an automated defense platform stopped responding to commands. On a dozen worlds, computer systems that had run perfectly for decades suddenly displayed error. Messages in a language no one could read. The messages were in English. But the aliens in the Great Hall were too busy celebrating to pay attention to such small problems. They had voted out the humans. They had won. They had no idea what they had just done to themselves. As Sarah's ship left Nexus Prime, she sat in her cabin and opened a bottle of wine she had been saving. Through her window, she could see the great space station growing smaller. Soon it would just be another point of light among the stars. Her communication pad beeped with incoming messages, reports from across human space. The first phase of Protocol 7 was complete. Every human in a critical position had quietly stepped down. Every human-maintained system had been handed over to local authorities with a simple note. Good luck. Sarah poured herself a glass of wine and raised it toward the window. To the Galactic Council, she said quietly. May you get exactly what you voted for. 3 days after the vote, the first system failed. It started small. A navigation beacon in the Rigel system simply stopped working. Ships had to use backup systems to find their way through the asteroid field. The local Altarian authorities sent repair crews, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong. The computer won't accept our commands, reported Chief Engineer Vaxil. His blue fingers moved over the control panel, but nothing happened. It keeps asking for authorization codes we don't have. On Tau Ceti Prime, the quantum communication array began showing error messages. The messages were in English, but when the technicians tried to translate them, the computer locked them out completely. Within hours, the planet lost contact with half the outer colonies. The Crystalline Collective faced a different problem. Their mining robots on the asteroid belt suddenly stopped working. The machines sat perfectly still in space, as if waiting for orders that would never come. When the Collective sent new commands, the robots replied with the same message over and over. Contract terminated. Thank you for your business. At first, the galaxy's leaders thought these were just random technical problems. Things broke sometimes. They could be fixed, but the problems kept spreading. The Draconian Empire woke up to find their orbital defense platforms offline. Massive weapons that could destroy entire fleets now floated dead in space. When Draconian engineers tried to restart them, they found the control codes had been changed. The new codes were locked behind security systems they couldn't break. This is impossible, snarled General Korthak, his golden scales dim with worry. These systems have worked for 200 years. They can't all break at once. But they could, and they were. The Veltar Confederation discovered that their food production plants had shut down. The complex machines that turned simple proteins into the nutrients their species needed were all displaying the same message. Maintenance contract expired. Please contact Terran Agricultural Solutions for renewal. Terran Agricultural Solutions no longer existed. It had been dissolved 3 days ago, right after the vote. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council met an emergency session. The Great Hall that had been full of celebration just days before now buzzed with panic and confusion. Species that had proudly voted against Earth were demanding answers. How many systems are affected? Asked the Zephyrian Archon. His energy form flickered more rapidly than usual, a sign of stress. The Altarian Prime Minister read from his datapad with shaking hands. 47 major navigation routes are down. 15 defense grids have failed. 312 automated systems are offline across 36 worlds. And they're all asking for human authorization codes, added the Veltar ambassador. His translation device was working, but barely. It kept switching between languages randomly. The Draconian representative stood up, her scales now completely dark. Are you telling us that humans controlled all these systems? Not controlled. said a new voice from the back of the hall. A small alien that looked like a walking mushroom had stood up. He was from one of the minor worlds that had voted against removing Earth. Maintained. The hall turned to look at him. Ambassador Sporsinger rarely spoke in council sessions. His people were considered primitive by the major powers. Humans didn't control our systems, Sporsinger continued. They just kept them running. For 300 years, they did the jobs nobody else wanted to do. They worked in dangerous places. They solved the problems that were too hard or too boring for the rest of us. That's ridiculous, snapped the Crystalline Collective's representative. We are perfectly capable of maintaining our own technology. Then why aren't you doing it now? Asked Sporsinger quietly. The question hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. More reports came in every hour. The hyperspace relay network that connected distant worlds was shutting down piece by piece. Ships were getting stranded between stars, forced to use much slower backup systems to call for help. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for centuries were becoming dangerous as safety systems failed. The worst news came from the frontier worlds. The automated defense systems that protected remote colonies from pirates and raiders had gone dark. Without human peacekeepers to patrol the dangerous sectors, criminal fleets were already moving in. 15 colonies have gone silent in the past day, reported the hegemony's intelligence chief. We think pirates have hit at least 6 of them. The council tried to send their own security forces, but it was hopeless. The major powers had small, elite militaries designed to fight other major powers. They didn't have the huge numbers of soldiers needed to police the entire galaxy. They had always left that job to the humans. On Earth, President Martinez watched the chaos spreading across the galaxy from his office in Geneva. Reports flooded in from human colonies throughout known space. The message was always the same. Local authorities demanding that humans fix the problems they were suddenly facing. Should we help them, sir? Asked his aide. Martinez shook his head. They voted us out. They made it clear they don't want us as partners. Why should we clean up their mess for free? The aide looked uncomfortable. Some of these colonies have human civilians on them. All human civilians in foreign space received evacuation orders yesterday, Martinez replied. The ships will arrive within the week. Anyone who wants to leave can leave, but many humans were choosing to stay. On the frontier worlds, human communities were declaring independence from their former governments. They had the weapons, the technical knowledge, and the local support to make it stick. Why should they abandon their homes because politicians on distant worlds didn't appreciate their work? Back in the council hall, the arguments were getting louder. Species were blaming each other for the crisis. The Zephyrians accused the Draconians of poor planning. The Draconians blamed the Veltar for not understanding the systems they used. Everyone blamed the smaller worlds for not speaking up sooner. We need to contact Earth immediately, declared the Altarian Prime Minister. This has gone too far. People are dying. On what authority? Asked the Archon. We voted them out of the council. They are no longer our partners. They're just another species now. Then we treat them like any other species, said the Draconian representative. We demand they fix what they broke. Ambassador Sporsinger made a sound that might have been laughter. You think they broke something? They didn't break anything. They just stopped fixing things that were already broken. What do you mean? Demanded the Veltar ambassador. Think about it, said Sporsinger. When was the last time any of you actually maintained a navigation beacon? Or updated the software on a defense platform? Or cleaned the radiation filters on a mining station? You never did those jobs. Humans did them. They did them for 300 years and you never even noticed. The truth was starting to sink in. The galaxy's infrastructure hadn't failed because humans sabotaged it. It had failed because humans stopped maintaining it. And none of the advanced civilizations knew how to do the maintenance themselves. The Crystalline Collective's representative spoke in a voice like breaking glass. How many humans were involved in essential operations? The answer came from the Council's own computers, the ones that were still working. The numbers appeared on the great screen, and a horrified silence fell over the hall. 60% of all navigation technicians were human. 70% of defense system engineers. 80% of the technicians who maintained the quantum communication network. 90% of the peacekeeping forces in dangerous sectors. The galaxy had been running on human expertise, and nobody had realized it until the humans were gone. In her ship heading back to Earth, Ambassador Chen received a priority message from the Council. They wanted to open negotiations. They were willing to discuss humanity's return to galactic civilization. Chen read the message twice, then deleted it without responding. They had made their choice. Now they could live with it. 2 weeks after the vote, galactic civilization was falling apart. The hegemony of Tau Ceti declared martial law when their orbital habitats started losing life support. The massive space cities that housed billions of beings were slowly suffocating as air recycling systems failed one by one. Hegemony engineers worked desperately to understand the complex machines, but the technical manuals were all written in English, and the computers refused to accept their commands. "We need the humans back," whispered Director Vashati as she watched oxygen levels drop on Habitat 7. "We need them now." But the humans were. The proud Draconian Empire faced an even worse crisis. Their genetic engineering laboratories, the source of their power and wealth, had become death traps. The safety systems that prevented deadly mutations were failing. Food synthesizers that had fed billions for centuries now produced toxic sludge instead of nutrition. The protein sequences were wrong, but no Draconian could figure out how to fix them. "How did this happen?" roared Emperor Scaroth, his golden scales now pale with fear.
"We are the masters of life itself."
His chief scientist, Dr. Vexala, held up a datapad with shaking claws. "The safety protocols were designed by Terran Biosystems Corporation, my lord. All the critical algorithms were written by human programmers. When they left, they took their access codes with them. Then contact them.
Order them to fix this."
"They won't answer our calls, sir." Terran Biosystems was dissolved the day after the vote. On Verdania, the plant people were facing a different nightmare. Their solar collection arrays, which powered their entire civilization, were slowly dying. The complex mirrors that focused starlight onto their bioconverters were falling out of alignment. Without constant adjustment, the arrays would fail completely within days. The Verdanians had never needed to maintain the arrays themselves. For 200 years, human engineering teams had done the dangerous work of spacewalking between the massive mirrors. Now the arrays drifted slowly out of position, and there was no one left who knew how to fix them. "Send our own people," ordered Prime Root Ashitel. "We tried," replied his aide, Branchkeeper Willow. "The radiation levels are too high. Our people get sick after just minutes in space. The humans had special suits and training. We never learned how to do it safely." The crisis was worst in the outer systems where human peacekeepers had once maintained order. Pirates and raiders who had been kept in check for decades now moved freely through the lawless regions. They attacked mining stations, enslaved entire colonies, and destroyed anything they couldn't steal. The Council's own military forces were helpless. The major powers had focused on building impressive warships designed to fight other major powers. They didn't have the hundreds of small, fast patrol ships needed to police the frontier. They didn't have troops trained for the dirty work of fighting pirates in asteroid fields and abandoned stations, but the humans had possessed both. On Proxima 3, the planet where the crisis had started, civilians huddled in refugee camps as warlords fought over the ruins. Both sides had expected the Galactic Council to eventually restore order. But the Council's peacekeeping force had been mostly human, and the humans were gone. "Where are the Blue Helmets?" asked a Proximan child, referring to the UN peacekeeping forces that had once protected worlds like hers. Her mother had no answer. The Galactic Council met in constant emergency session now. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had become a place of fear and desperation. Species that had been proud enemies for centuries were now forced to work together, united only by their common crisis. "We have to contact Earth," said the Altarian Prime Minister for the 100th time. "This has gone beyond politics. Entire worlds are dying." "We tried," replied the Zephyrian Archon. His energy form was dim now, flickering with exhaustion. "Earth isn't answering. The Sol system is completely closed to outside contact." It was true. Humanity had thrown up a barrier of automated defense platforms around their home system. Any ship that approached was met by polite but firm warnings to turn back. The message was always the same. "The Terran Federation is no longer part of galactic affairs. Please respect our sovereign space." "What about the human colonies?" asked the Veltar ambassador. "There are still human settlements throughout the galaxy. Most of them have declared independence," reported the Council's intelligence chief. "They're setting up their own governments and making deals with local species. The ones that haven't gone independent yet are evacuating back to human space." The reports from the human colonies painted a picture that terrified the Council. Human settlements were thriving while the galaxy burned around them. They had working technology, functioning infrastructure, and most importantly, they knew how to maintain it all. Some colonies had even started offering their services to nearby worlds. For a price, a very high price. On New Shanghai, a human mining colony in the Vega system, Mayor Rebecca Santos met with desperate Altarian officials. The Altarians needed someone to restart their asteroid mining operations before their industrial economy collapsed completely. "We can help you," Santos said calmly, "but it won't be cheap. Our standard rate for emergency technical assistance is 1 million credits per day, plus materials and hazard pay for our workers." The Altarian negotiator, Minister Yexal, nearly fainted. 1 million? That's 10 times what human companies used to charge. Santos shrugged. "Supply and demand. You voted us out, remember? We're not partners anymore. We're independent contractors. If you don't like our rates, you're welcome to fix your own problems." But they couldn't fix their own problems. That was becoming more obvious every day. On the frontier world of Haven's Rest, human colonists watched as alien refugees fled from pirate attacks. The local draconian governor had come to them begging for protection. "Our orbital defenses are down," Governor Thyssick admitted, his pride finally broken. "We have no ships, no soldiers. The raiders will be here within days." Colonel Sarah Martinez, the colony's military commander, looked at the proud draconian who had once ordered humans around like servants. "And what exactly do you want us to do about it?" "Protect us," Thyssick whispered. "Please, why should we?" asked Martinez. "Your people voted to kick us out of civilized space. You said we were too violent, too aggressive. Well, now you get to see what the galaxy looks like without our violence keeping the peace." But even as she spoke harshly, Martinez was already planning the defense of Haven's Rest. Not because she cared about the draconian governor, but because human civilians lived there too. And because letting pirates run wild went against everything she had sworn to protect. Back on Earth, President Martinez received daily reports on the spreading chaos. His military advisors painted a grim picture of galactic civilization in collapse. Billions of beings were suffering because critical systems were failing. "We could end this in days," said Admiral Chen, Sarah's sister. "Deploy the fleet, restore order, fix the infrastructure. People are dying out there." "People who voted to get rid of us," Martinez replied coldly. "People who said they didn't want our help." "Not all of them voted," Chen pointed out. "The smaller worlds, the colonies, the civilians, they had no say in this." Martinez stared out his window at the Geneva skyline. Somewhere out there, beyond the atmosphere, defense satellites kept watch over the human home system. They were ready to fight off any invasion, but they couldn't fight off the weight of responsibility that pressed down on him. "Sir," said his aide, entering with another report. "Priority message from the Outer Rim Coalition. 15 species are requesting emergency aid. They're offering full diplomatic recognition and trade agreements." These were the small worlds, the ones that had tried to speak for humanity in the Council, the ones that had been ignored by the major powers for centuries. Martinez read the message carefully. Unlike the desperate pleas from the Council, this was a formal request between equals. The Coalition wasn't demanding that humans fix their problems. They were asking for help and offering something in return. "Draft a response," Martinez said finally. "Tell them we're willing to discuss mutual aid agreements. But make it clear, we're not coming back as galactic janitors. Any partnership will be between equals." As the aide left to send the message, Martinez wondered if the major powers would ever learn the lesson the small worlds had grasped immediately. You couldn't build a civilization by pushing the hard work onto others, and then dismissing them when it was convenient. The galaxy was about to find out what happened when the people who kept things running decided they had better things to do. 6 months after the vote, the galaxy was dying. The Zephyrian Archon floated alone in his private chambers on Nexus Prime, watching reports stream in from across civilized space. Each one brought worse news than the last. The proud hegemony of Tau Ceti had lost 3 of their orbital cities when life support systems failed completely. The Draconian Empire was buying food from primitive worlds at ruinous prices because their own synthesizers could only produce poison. Half the navigation beacons in the galaxy were dark, making travel dangerous and slow. But worst of all were the reports from the frontier. Without human peacekeepers, pirates and raiders ruled the outer systems. Entire species were being enslaved or wiped out by criminals who no longer feared any consequences. The Archon's energy form pulsed with despair. He had led the vote to remove Earth from the Council. He had convinced the other species that humans were too dangerous, too unpredictable. Now he watched civilization crumble because those same dangerous, unpredictable humans weren't there to hold it together. A chime announced an incoming message. The Archon accepted it, and the holographic image of Admiral Torres appeared in his chamber. The human looked older than the Archon remembered, with new lines around his eyes and gray in his hair. Behind him, the Archon could see the bridge of a warship unlike anything in the galactic fleet. "Admiral Torres," the Archon said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Thank you for finally accepting our communication." Torres nodded briefly. "Archon, I understand you have something to say." For a moment, the Archon couldn't speak. He was looking at the being he had personally denounced as a warmonger and threat to galactic peace just 6 months ago. Now that same being was his only hope. "The Council formally requests assistance," the Archon said finally. "Our civilization is collapsing. Billions are dying. We need human expertise to restore critical systems." "Interesting," Torres replied. "And what are you offering in return?" The Archon's form flickered with confusion. "Offering? We're offering to let humanity rejoin the Council, of course. Full membership, all previous privileges restored." Torres was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than the space between stars. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You vote us out of galactic civilization. You call us dangerous savages who can't be trusted. You celebrate when we leave. Then when everything starts falling apart, you want us to come back and fix it. And you think the reward for cleaning up your mess should be the privilege of rejoining the same council that kicked us out?" "It's not like that," the Archon protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's exactly like that," Torres said. "But here's what you don't understand, Archon. We're not the same humans who left 6 months ago. We've changed. We've grown. And we've made new friends." The image shifted and the Archon saw other beings on the bridge behind Torres. He recognized some of them. Representatives from the Outer Rim Coalition, the small worlds that the major powers had always ignored. But there were others he didn't know. Species that looked primitive but carried themselves with new confidence. "Meet our partners," Torres said. "The 15 worlds of the Outer Rim Coalition, the mining guilds of the asteroid belt, the free colonies of the frontier zone. While you were busy trying to maintain your perfect galactic order, we were building something new. Pirates and savages," the Archon said dismissively, though his voice shook. "Really?" Torres smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Captain Vectar, would you introduce yourself?" One of the aliens stepped forward. The Archon recognized him as a member of the Veltar species, but this one wore strange armor covered in human and alien symbols. "I am Captain Vectar of the Free Trader Alliance," the alien said in perfect English. "Former pirate, current fleet commander. The humans taught us there's more profit in protecting trade routes than raiding them." Another alien joined him, this one looking like a walking tree. "Ambassador Keeks of the Verdanian Republic. We've learned much from our human partners about defending ourselves. The Council doesn't negotiate with criminals," the Archon said weakly. "Good thing we're not the Council anymore," Torres replied. "We're the Terran Alliance, and we do negotiate with anyone who treats us as equals. Which brings me to our terms." "Terms?" The Archon's energy form pulsed with indignation. "You're in no position to make demands." Torres's expression didn't change. "Really? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you need us a lot more than we need you. But if you want to keep trying to fix your problems yourself, that's fine with us. We have plenty of other work to do." The Admiral reached toward his communication panel as if to end the call. "Wait," the Archon said quickly. "What are your terms?" Torres leaned back in his command chair. "First, the Galactic Council is dissolved. It's been proven ineffective. In its place, we established the Galactic Compact, with representatives from all worlds, not just the major powers." "Impossible," the Archon protested. "The primitive worlds can't govern themselves, let alone participate in galactic affairs." "Primitive?" Captain Vectar laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "We've built a defense fleet that your advanced civilizations can't match. We've restored order to half the frontier. And we did it all without a single committee meeting." Torres continued as if the Archon hadn't spoken. "Second, all essential infrastructure will be jointly maintained by the Compact. No single species gets to hide in their ivory towers while others do the dirty work. The major powers will never agree to that," the Archon said. "Then they can keep fixing their own problems." Torres replied. "How's that working out for you so far?" The Archon's form dimmed. Reports from across Zephyrian space painted the same picture everywhere. Systems failing, populations dying, civilization crumbling. His people were experts at energy manipulation and philosophical debate. but they couldn't repair a broken navigation beacon to save their lives. Third, Torres said, human colonies throughout the galaxy will be granted full independence. No more colonial governments appointed by distant powers. Some of those colonies are in our territory. We're in your territory, Torres corrected. Past tense. They've declared independence and we recognize their sovereignty. If you want to dispute that claim, you're welcome to try. But I should warn you, they're under the protection of the Terran Alliance now. The Archon processed this information with growing horror. If human colonies were independent, they could make their own trade deals, their own defense agreements. The major powers would lose control of entire sectors of space. This is blackmail, the Archon said. No, Torres replied calmly. This is consequences. You wanted us gone, so we left. You wanted to handle galactic affairs without us, so we're letting you try. The fact that you're failing isn't our problem unless you make it worth our while to help. And if we refuse your terms? Torres shrugged. Then you refuse. We have plenty of work helping our actual allies. The Outer Rim Coalition has been very generous with mining rights and trading contracts. The former pirates are excellent at providing security for our merchant fleets. We don't need you anymore, Archon. The question is whether you need us. The Archon looked at the data streaming across his personal screens. 3 more worlds had gone dark in the past hour. The Crystalline Collective was reporting complete failure of their manufacturing systems. The Draconian Empire had started rationing food as their agricultural collapse accelerated. The other council members will have to vote on this, the Archon said finally. Of course they will, Torres agreed. Take all the time you need. But while you're debating, remember that people are dying, and every day you wait, our new allies get stronger and more independent. Eventually, they might not need the old galactic powers at all. The communication ended, leaving the Archon alone with his thoughts and his failures. Within hours, the other council members were demanding emergency sessions. The Draconian Emperor wanted to launch a military attack on human colonies. The hegemony suggested economic sanctions. The Crystalline Collective proposed threatening to cut off trade, but they had no military that could function without human-maintained logistics. Their economies were collapsing without human expertise, and they had nothing to trade except broken technology and empty promises. For the first time in galactic history, the major powers were helpless, and everyone knew it. On his command ship, Admiral Torres watched the reports come in from human colonies across the galaxy. Every day, more alien governments were sending quiet messages asking for technical assistance. Every day, the price for that assistance went up. The humans weren't coming back as servants. If they came back at all, it would be as equals, or maybe as the ones in charge. 1 year after the vote, the galaxy had a new order. The signing ceremony took place aboard the human battleship Defiance, floating in neutral space between the old Council worlds and the new Terran Alliance territories. Representatives from over 200 species crowded into the ship's main hangar, which had been converted into a meeting hall for the historic occasion. Admiral Torres stood at the center of it all, no longer just a military commander, but the elected president of the Terran Alliance. Beside him stood former Ambassador Sarah Chen, now Secretary of State, and dozens of other humans who had once served the old galactic order and were now helping to build something new. But they weren't alone. Captain Vectar of the former pirates wore the uniform of the new Galactic Defense Force. Ambassador Kiex represented the Outer Rim Coalition, which now controlled more territory than any of the old major powers. Even some surprising faces were present, former enemies who had swallowed their pride and joined the winning side. The Zephyrian Archon floated near the back of the crowd, his energy form dim with defeat. Beside him stood what was left of the old Galactic Council. The Draconian Emperor had been forced to abdicate when his people revolted over the food crisis. The hegemony of Tau Ceti had split into 3 separate governments. The Crystalline Collective had simply collapsed when their manufacturing base failed completely. The Galactic Compact is hereby established, President Torres announced, his voice carrying clearly through the ship's speakers. All member worlds, regardless of size or technological development, will have equal representation in the new government. The document they were signing was radical by the standards of the old galaxy. Instead of being ruled by the handful of major powers, the compact would be governed by elected representatives from every inhabited world. Instead of leaving essential work to one species, all members would contribute to maintaining the infrastructure that kept civilization running. Most importantly, instead of treating some species as servants and others as masters, The compact would operate on the principle that everyone had something valuable to contribute. "This is madness," whispered the former Altarian Prime Minister to the Archon. "Primitive worlds having equal votes with advanced civilizations? It will never work." The Archon didn't reply. He was watching as species after species signed the new charter, the primitive worlds that had been ignored for centuries, the former pirate clans that had been transformed into legitimate security forces, the human colonies that had grown into independent powers in their own right. Even some members of the old major powers were signing, though they represented reformed governments rather than the old regimes. The new Draconian Republic had been founded by former rebels who had overthrown the Empire with human help. The Tau Ceti Democratic Union represented the most stable fragment of the old hegemony. As the ceremony continued, reports came in from across the galaxy showing the results of the new order. Trade routes that had been dark for months were coming back online as mixed human-alien crews restored the navigation beacons. Worlds that had been terrorized by pirates now hosted joint patrols of human marines and local forces. Food was flowing to hungry populations as human agricultural experts worked with alien scientists to restart failed synthesizers. The galaxy was healing. "How did they do it so quickly?" asked the Veltar observer, watching as a mixed crew of humans and former pirates worked together to repair a damaged space station on the main screen. Sarah Chen overheard the question and smiled. "Simple. We stopped treating people like they were expendable." It was true. The new system was built on cooperation rather than domination. Human engineers worked alongside alien specialists, sharing knowledge instead of hoarding it. Former pirates brought their understanding of the frontier to legitimate security work. Small worlds contributed resources and workers that had been ignored by the old powers. Most importantly, the dangerous, dirty jobs that kept civilization running were no longer dumped on one species. Everyone took turns maintaining the infrastructure. Everyone contributed to the defense forces. Everyone had a stake in making the system work. Captain Maria Santos, now Admiral Santos of the Compact Defense Force, stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching mixed squadrons patrol the former pirate territories. Human ships flew alongside vessels from a dozen different species, all working together to keep the trade routes safe. "Incoming message from Patrol Group 7, reported her communications officer, a young Draconian who had joined the service after the Republic was formed. "They've intercepted a slave transport. Mixed crew is moving in to liberate the prisoners." Santos nodded approvingly. The mixed crews were one of the best innovations of the new system. Instead of segregated fleets where each species only worked with their own kind, the compact forces integrated everyone. Humans provided tactical leadership and technical skills. Veltar brought precise coordination and planning. Former pirates contributed their knowledge of criminal operations and frontier survival. The result was a defense force more effective than any the galaxy had ever seen. On the industrial world of New Geneva, human and alien workers labored side by side in factories that produced everything from navigation beacons to medical supplies. The old system had concentrated manufacturing in the hands of a few major powers, making the entire galaxy vulnerable when those systems failed. The new compact spread production across hundreds of worlds, making the economy more stable and giving everyone a chance to prosper. Dr. Vexala, the former Draconian scientist, now worked in a joint research facility where humans and aliens shared knowledge freely. The breakthrough discoveries coming out of these mixed teams were already revolutionizing medicine, engineering, and agriculture across the galaxy. "The synthesis rate is increasing exponentially," she reported to her human colleague, Dr. James Park. "Your people's intuitive approach combined with our systematic analysis is producing results neither of us could achieve alone." Park smiled as he watched proteins that had resisted synthesis for decades finally come together in the lab. "Turns out cooperation works better than competition. Who would have thought?" But the real proof of the new system's success was visible in the frontier territories where humans and their allies had built something unprecedented. Worlds that had been lawless war zones were now peaceful and prosperous. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together on joint projects. Children who grew up never knowing the old system couldn't understand why anyone had thought it was a good idea to give all the hard work to one group and then complain about how they did it. On Haven's Rest, Colonel Martinez watched her mixed unit train in the local gravity. Human Marines worked alongside Draconian commandos and Veltar technicians, preparing for their next peacekeeping mission. The old racial prejudices were disappearing as beings learned to judge each other by competence and character, rather than species and origin. "Colonel," her aide reported, "we have a request for assistance from the Rigel system. Local authorities can't handle a pirate incursion on their own." "Mixed response?" Martinez asked. "Of course. Human tactical teams, Veltar intelligence specialists, and local security forces. Standard doctrine now," Martinez nodded. Standard doctrine had changed dramatically from the old days when humans did all the fighting, while other species stayed safely at home. Now everyone contributed to their own defense, and everyone shared in both the risks and the benefits of maintaining galactic peace. As the signing ceremony concluded aboard the Defiance, President Torres looked out at the assembled representatives and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope for the future. The old galaxy was built on the idea that some people mattered more than others, he said in his closing speech, that some species were meant to rule while others were meant to serve. That system failed because it wasted the talents and potential of most of the galaxy's population. He gestured to the mixed crowd of humans and aliens, all working together to build something better. The compact is built on a different idea, that everyone has something valuable to contribute, that civilization works best when everyone has a stake in making it succeed, that the beings willing to do the hard, dangerous work of keeping society running deserve respect and partnership, not dismissal and contempt. The applause that followed came from hundreds of different species, but it sounded like one voice. 5 years later, historians would mark the signing of the Galactic Compact as the beginning of the greatest period of peace and prosperity in galactic history. Trade flourished as secure routes connected even the most remote worlds. Scientific advancement accelerated as mixed teams shared knowledge across species barriers. Crime dropped to historic lows as effective. Integrated security forces maintained order throughout known space. But on that day, as the last signatures were added to the charter and the old galaxy officially died, the assembled beings knew only that they had built something better from the ashes of what had failed. The vote to oust Earth had passed. But in the end, it was the galaxy that had been ousted from the narrow, prejudiced thinking that had held it back. And humanity, as always, had been willing to do the hard work of building something better to replace it.